Alright, already back with an update. I'll answer a question right away. Why don't I put this on the chassis, which is sitting under that tarp, to line everything up? The short answer is I just don't want to. So this is what I do to make sure that when I put this replacement piece in, everything is going to line up, because that's the amount on the chassis, and the bolt holes got to line up. So basically what I do is I take a measurement from the ground to where this sits. That's 30 7/8, and then I get this fantastic little plumb bob that a follower sent me, which I love. It's the cutest little thing I've ever seen. But then I make up my plumb bob, run it right through the middle. So when I put in my replacement piece, I'll cut below this so that my reference point stays, and there you have it. Now, not to worry before, obviously, I think before I set this thing in primer and all that sort of stuff, we will put it on the chassis and we'll make sure everything's fine. So we'll have to do that at some point, but I want to get everything done before I do that. So anyways, I love this little solution. I think it's just simple and elegant. I really love this repair that I did. Just for the fact that I was able to kind of maybe think outside of the box a little bit. I've seen lots of approaches with how to do this rear body shock mount, and I've seen people do jigs, and the best thing is probably to have it on the chassis, but I've seen all sorts of sort of approaches with how people do it. And, I thought long and hard about how I wanted to approach it, and I wanted to do it kind of the simplest way possible. So this plumb bob was kind of the solution that I came up with, and it ended up working really, really well. Now, remember, what you're seeing is what happened 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. I worked on this project between 2020 and 2024, and it's actually complete now. So we're just going back and compiling some videos. And so because it's finished now, I have the benefit of hindsight, and I can tell you that this method does work. You do still have to be quite careful with it, and you do have to be quite thoughtful with the approach, and you still have to measure and check and stuff like that. But this is kind of what I would call a little bit of a high risk, high reward. It's a little bit risky what you're doing, and I can't guarantee your results, but it worked for me. But if you can't get your body back on the chassis, or you're just a little bit lazy like me, this can work. Just remember to take your measurements, and obviously before you want to put the whole thing in paint, get the whole thing put back together so you can verify everything. I will say one thing, that when I did put the body on the chassis, there were a couple fitment issues. The holes all lined up fine, but I did, there was just a little bit of sheet metal behind where those mounts were that I just needed to pull out a little bit just to accommodate the shock mount on the chassis. So while the bolt holes lined up, and I'm going to call that a panel fitment issue and not really a me issue, where the panel actually just was not quite right, and I just needed to make a couple cuts, pull those panels out so that those shock mounts that sits on, it just was going to not interfere. Like everything worked out. It was just a little bit of adjustment when I got it on the chassis, like a 20-minute job sort of thing. So still make sure that you get the body on the chassis before you put it into paint. I mean, that's really important, just to make sure for everything, fenders on, hood on, deck lid on, doors on, make sure everything's on before you put it in paint. And that way, that's the time that you want to fix it if there's problems. And yeah, you'll see again, I just cut out in the panel for that shock mount replacement, I just cut out what I need. And that was the best approach for me. You might have a different approach. Again, you might have a completely different approach from what I'm doing, which is good and great and fine. I'm just showing you kind of what I did. And as someone who had never done this before, this was my thinking. And really, this panel was really difficult to fit. It's actually got layers of sheet metal. It's not just one layer, it's got a couple layers. And so it's hard to bend, hard to kind of manipulate. What I really probably needed was a shrinker stretcher or some other tools to help me make the curve a little bit better to meet that wheel well. But we work with what we've got, and so it just took time. And some of the lessons I learned from the previous metalwork and panel replacements that I've done was you really like setting it up and fitting it and getting it fitting good before you start welding. That's really really, really beneficial. So at this point, again, because I had so much time in metalwork and kind of fitting panels and I was getting the hang of it, I knew then at this time that the really best thing for me to do is to spend the extra time, fit that panel as best as you can, because then everything after that just goes way better. That may seem like obvious advice, but someone out there needs to hear that. Just spend the time, fit it. Fit it as good as you can, fit it perfectly before you weld it. And if you have any questions about what we're doing here, or if you're maybe lost or anything, go back and watch some of the previous episodes. I've got episodes every week, and just keep coming back because I've got loads more.